Hello. Well, as viewers to my channel will know, on those occasions when I don't have my head in a video recorder, something like this, I run an audio and video transfer business. And here's an interesting thing. I actually do talk to quite a few of my competitors, because sometimes I have work that I can't do, for example, cinefilm, and I send it to a competitor, or a competitor has something that they can't do, an obscure format. I do a lot of those, and they send work to me. So, though we're competitors, there's a kind of a bit of a friendly community going on. And whilst I was talking to some of my competitors over the last few weeks, since the events in Ukraine and the cost of living crisis, I was noting that business had taken quite a downturn in the first few weeks and months of this year. And my competitors were saying the same. And it occurred to me, if it's not just me, if we're all feeling this, perhaps we should get a feel for what's going on in our business. So I contacted a whole group of people in the same business as me and asked them a few questions. And I've got some results, and they're really interesting. So let's go through the results. There were a total of 12 businesses plus myself, all contributed to this. We also have some extra comments along the way, which we can look at. Is really interesting, I think, for people in this or any other small business at the moment. Let's get stuck in. My first question then was asking about how things are now in around about May of 2022 compared to how they were in January of this year, to see if people have detected a significant drop in business due to Ukraine and cost of living that's hitting us right now. And here are the responses I got. So we're seeing a few outliers of companies that say that business is up slightly this year, and others about the same, but all the rest say businesses are either slightly down or significantly down. So I think we can say that on balance that the cost of living and Ukraine crisis has been quite negative for business. Now, personally, I saw a big drop off in business in the first few weeks after this Ukraine crisis happened, but then maybe due to pent-up demand, maybe because people realise now that it's going to be a long drawn-out affair and life's going to carry on for the time being, I've seen a significant bounce back in the last week or two as we go towards the second half of May of 2022. My next question was asking how things are now compared to around about 5 years ago. So a longer term view of how this business is going. And results are broadly similar. We're seeing a drop in business, a significant drop in business from nearly all of my respondents. We've got a few that are slightly up or significantly up, but generally business is looking a bit down now compared to the way things were 5 years ago. My next question was a kind of prediction. What do people think business is going to be like over the next 5 years? This is very hard, of course, for people to estimate, because we don't know how much material is still out there to be transferred, whether there's a good financial state in the country to do that over the next 5 years. It's very much a guessing game, and the results I got back from this question are extremely mixed. Pretty much some say it's going to get worse, some people it's going to get better, some people just don't know. Very mixed result. So my next one was looking just at that thing. Are we running out of material? So I'm looking at all businesses in the audio video transfer field. Now, I personally don't do cinefilm, but a lot of these other companies do. And of course, cinefilms were made over decades. So it might be that the backlog of cinefilm is longer than the backlog of, say, modern camcorder tapes, where most of those perhaps have been dealt with already. I find the same with old audio tapes. I run reel-to-reel audio tapes, and people have those lying around in the loft, and I get tapes in that were recorded in the 60s and 70s. Actually, they very often still sound really good. So it might be that the amount of material out there is huge, and there's just a very, very long trail of people still finding recordings that they want to have transferred. So asking that question, do you think that the amount of material out there is starting to run out? Nobody thought it's nearly over, which I suppose is encouraging. Some thought it was very much starting to run out, or at least starting to run out, and most of the rest felt they were past the peak, but there's still plenty out there. And a few thought there was no shortage of material out there at all. I think there was a distinct peak in this business when they shut off the analog transmissions, and that occurred around about the same time as flat panel TVs started to become extremely cheap, and people were getting rid of their old tube TVs and throwing away their VHS machines and replacing it with a flat panel TV, and then realizing that they've got nothing to play their tapes on. So at that point, I think there was a big glut of work from people upgrading the equipment in their front room and realizing that they couldn't access their old recordings. Now, of course, the people in this business are of a very wide range of ages. I'm probably typical. Some people will be older, some are definitely younger. But I've asked the question about what do you think will happen when you retire, however many years that might be in the future. What do you think you're going to do with your equipment? Would you retain it because it's just fascinating stuff, and I'm sure I'll keep some of mine? Do you think you might sell the equipment or sell it as a whole ongoing business? So here's our responses. And there was quite a large amount of people here in the I don't know. So there you go. There is a potential in the future for someone or some people to buy up a lot of the equipment that's being presently used by audio and video transfer businesses and make one large business dealing with all of this. But they would need a lot of expertise. And there is a problem, you see, that there's people like myself who've been working in audio and video equipment for many, many decades. But when we come to retire in maybe 10, 15, 20 years, whenever that is, how much expertise is there still going to be left for maintaining the equipment? And it's getting increasingly hard to find spares and good working machines. And I know I've spoken to some of my competitors who say, this is the biggest worry, is especially with video equipment. What are they going to do when you can't get hold of decent quality video recorders of all the various formats that you want to support? There is a real problem, right? When there's no expertise left and there's no spare parts left and there's no good working machines left, how are video transfer businesses going to function? And the result will probably be that prices will go up because it becomes more and more expensive for them to maintain the little working equipment that's left. So if you're looking at getting some audio and video tapes transferred, don't leave it too long. Now, personally, I transfer nearly all of my content now onto USB sticks or portable drives or uploads. I try to discourage people from still taking DVDs, CDs, what have you, in physical discs. And there's several reasons. I find, anyway, that DVDs tend to get lost and scratched. They're hard to back up for most people. You're working with compressed MPEG-2 files, which is not the highest quality, and it makes it almost impossible to extract the material and edit it and upload it and share it and back it up and do all the things that people want to do today. So I really don't recommend DVDs anymore. I used to do them, go back sort of 15 years, I was doing DVDs all the time. But these days I seriously push back against that. Still, the odd customer insists, oh, it's for granny. But in that case, I'd recommend also taking video files. So, in fact, I've got hundreds of spare DVDs I'll never probably use up now because I just don't get through them anymore. So I was asking my competitors, do you still do CDs and DVDs? And here's the results. So some are saying not as often as I used to, and like me, some are by special request or almost never. Excuse that blank one, that simply had a response I couldn't use on the questionnaire. But surprisingly, a sizable amount do still do CDs, DVDs and Blu-rays. Now, at least one of those respondents said that they're using MDisc, which is a very secure and long-lasting format or type of CD and DVD and Blu-ray. Actually, not CD, DVD and Blu-ray. And I can see that overcomes some of the things I've been talking about, okay? They're not so likely to fail and get scratched and data loss. They're more robust than normal DVDs and Blu-rays. However, I would argue, if you look 30 years into the future, how is somebody going to find a working drive to play them? I'm still not convinced that is a good way to store data. I think if you provide somebody with a USB stick or a hard disk, maybe more than one copy of that, they can make multiple copies of that data, they can upload it, they can use cloud storage, perhaps depending on the file sizes, they can share with family and friends, and so they can make backups as well, and there's a good chance that that data will still be around in 30 years or more. But I think any kind of disk is going to be a liability for someone trying to recover that data in the future. And you also have the problem that the amount of data those disks store is quite small. It's quite normal for me to do USB sticks in 256 gigabyte size or hard disks in terabytes, and it's just not practical to store that amount of data on any kind of optical media. So I understand why people might like that MDisc idea. If you're still going to produce something you want to be able to play on a DVD player or Blu-ray player, great. They are good from that point of view, but I think longer term a proper data storage is better. There's also some debate about whether MDisc still has a future, how long they're going to continue to be manufactured for, if they're still in manufacture at all. So when you consider that the optical drives, okay, they're probably still in manufacture as well, but for how much longer? It's possibly not wise, in my opinion. My next question, possibly a bit divisive, because I wasn't trying to ask people how they felt about Brexit here. I was trying to find out what people feel it's had in terms of an impact on their business. Has it made a significant financial difference to the way your business runs? Then there's also a matter of how easy it is to do business with parts of Europe now compared to how easy it was some years ago. But just look at the results here for how Brexit has affected the business. There's a few people who feel it's positive. The vast majority of people feel it's either little either way or negative. So I think we can safely say there's not much benefit to the audio and video transfer business from Brexit. If anything, it's quite negative. Let me give you a brief description of a sort of problem that can happen now. I had a job from Southern Ireland. It was several U-matic tapes, and they were sent to me. I did the transfers and I uploaded the files. The customer was happy, asked me to send the tapes back. Now I have a pre-designed form on my computer, which means that it fills out an awful lot of the details for me. It fills in the date and puts my signature on it and all these good things for the CN22 form. It also has something called a, well, I can't say it, an EORI number. It's like a VAT number for companies that are not VAT registered. So that should help smooth the way. So I put the CN22 form on and sent it to Ireland. Weeks later, the customer was saying, "Where's my package?" Weeks and weeks later, it came back with a sticker on it saying, CN22 form not machine readable. Well, yes, it was. There was nothing wrong with it. Just like all the others I've been sending for weeks and weeks and weeks. So we had to arrange for sending the package back again. That had to be paid for. I had to put the CN22 form on again. Same form, sent it again, and this time it got through. So that's obviously time as well as cost. And you have to say, what benefit is there? What good is that doing small businesses? Now, Ireland, I get a lot of Betamax tapes from Southern Ireland. have done over years. I suspect that the Betamax format was particularly successful in Southern Ireland, perhaps compared to other parts of Europe. So it's important that it's easy for people in Southern Ireland to be able to do business with me. And it might now be, of course, that it's easier for someone in Southern Ireland to do business with a company in, say, France than it is to do business with the UK. Of course, there's nothing really different now with Europe compared to the rest of the world. It's just we have to go through that same paperwork procedure. It's also worth noting, if ever you're getting anything sent now from whether it be Europe or the rest of the world, if you're getting something like videotapes sent to you, customers can think those videotapes are really valuable. Well, they're really valuable to them, but they don't have any intrinsic value. And I've had the problem a few times with customers from, say, USA or elsewhere, that they've said their videotapes are worth £500 because they want them to be treated as though they're worth £500. And what happens is they get stuck in customs because they're then considered to be an expensive import, and they'll apply VAT and other charges on top. And then you have to pay that. You have to find out whose package it was that you've got a card for, saying that there's an outstanding amount to pay for, because it doesn't say on the card you get saying there's outstanding bill. It just says there is an outstanding bill. You have to find out which customer it is that sent them and sort out payment, which can amount to hundreds of pounds, just because somebody filled out that their videotapes were worth £500, where in actual fact the real value of a bunch of old video cassettes is like £5 if you're lucky. So it's worth telling people, if they're having something sent to you from abroad, that put on the customs label is only worth £10 if it's a bunch of something like videotapes that have no intrinsic value anyway. On with the questionnaire. So what impact do you think COVID has had on business? Ignoring any government grants, of course, which would skew this, because certainly if you watch my videos at the beginning of when COVID broke out, I was saying, oh dear, us self-employed people have been left high and dry. Business had gone off a cliff, we weren't earning anything, and there was no help, there was no furlough scheme going on for self-employed people. And later they did introduce a self-employed grant system which would allow you to make a claim for the loss caused by COVID, which most, I think, businesses will have taken up. There were several issues, and they would have taken up as many as they needed for how much impact there was on their business. Personally, I found that after a big drop in business at the start of the COVID outbreak, people started rummaging in their lofts because they had nothing else to do, and digging out videotapes that they'd been meaning to get transferred for years. And business actually picked up. It wasn't very profitable business, it wasn't very good business, it wasn't the big commercial jobs that I'm used to getting. It was a pile of mouldy tapes that had been literally stored in a loft for years. Not the best work in the world, but at least some work. So business recovered and even went up slightly for a time after the COVID lockdowns had been going for a bit of time. So I've asked the question about how business has responded totally as a result of COVID, but ignoring any government grants. And I think the response is extremely mixed on this. Some people felt it was quite negative, or a bit negative, or didn't make much difference at the end of the day, or a bit positive, or very positive. And I understand why it's so mixed up. One of the things being, of course, people can't tell how their business would have been if it hadn't been for COVID. But I do believe that one of the reasons it did appear positive was because people started rummaging around in their lofts, finding things. The next question I actually wasn't going to do. It was one of my competitors said, oh, I really want to know the answer to this. So, okay, what's more important? Cost, quality, or some mix thereof? Because some customers seem to be very much cost driven. They'll go to some outfit on eBay who will charge £3.50 to put a VHS tape onto a DVD. Others are extremely quality driven. They want the very, very best and below the cost. And many customers are somewhere in the middle. So what's the kind of feel for how most customers feel about the sort of cost to quality ratio? This was another one where we had an extremely mixed response. Everything to mostly cost, right the way through mostly quality. And it may depend a little bit on where the individual businesses are pitched. Those who are still transferring material to DVD, it might be more cost driven, and those who are possibly using extremely high bitrate codecs and some fancy equipment may be all quality. So it's extremely mixed, and personally I think it's mixed. I think that most customers are wanting good value for money, but they want the quality. Even if they're only, for example, watching it at the moment on something like a tablet, get the quality there so it can be displayed on a big TV and still look good, and it'll stand up to editing and sharing and is future resistant. So personally, I produce large files for editing and smaller files for easy viewing, and I think that's a sensible way to go. But I don't go completely silly. I don't create absolutely massive files which would be appropriate for, say, digital Betacam and apply those to VHS. I think you are wasting your time producing excessively large files for domestic formats. Other people have different views though, so don't start hammering me on the comments saying, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, because different customers want different things. Now, my last question was something that's really on my mind. I'm having a lot of trouble with mouldy tapes. Now, it might be because I've done some YouTube videos about working on mouldy tapes, and now every time somebody types in mouldy video 8 tape on Google, it's that guy, he knows how to do it. So I get a lot of mouldy tapes. So it might be that I'm particularly skewed in that response there. But having a look at how my competitors are feeling with mouldy tapes, it's clear that it's a problem. Even if most of my competitors are saying only 1 to 5% of the incoming tapes are mouldy, some are definitely saying it's a lot more than that, and in general everyone's receiving mouldy tapes. Now, mould can have different levels of effect on people's tapes, depending on one thing is on the format. So thicker, heavier grade tapes, U-matic and VHS and Betamax, a little bit of mould will just peel off the top of the tape and it won't really matter. If they're deeply mouldy, it'll affect the picture quality. But a lot of the thinner tapes, like Video 8 and Mini DV, and I've had mouldy DAT audio tapes as well, it'll glue the tape together and then the tape will just snap. So it's not like you can just say, oh well, the picture quality is not quite so good. It fundamentally stops you from transferring the tape unless you actively clear the mould off, and I have a rig here which I use for clearing mould, and it takes hours. It's no fun at all. So that's only going to get worse. Oh, of course, some of my competitors do a lot of cine film, and mould is an issue on that too. The hazard can be if tapes are badly stored, especially if they've been stored in a loft or a garage or a shed, then mould is a real issue, and that's only going to get worse. So I've been in this business now for over 15 years, and I used to receive the odd mouldy tape and not know what to do about it. These days I receive mouldy tapes every single week. Imagine how it's going to be 20 years from now. Some tapes handle mould better than others. So, for example, with Video 8 tapes, Sony tapes, they can go mouldy, yes, but only if they're really badly stored. Fuji branded tapes, they're always mouldy. If they've not been stored perfectly, and even sometimes if they have, they will go mouldy. And there can be other related issues, not so much mould, but you can get an effect called sticky shed syndrome, where the tape starts to lose its adhesion to the binding and causes it to squeal or shed oxide, typically oxide, onto the heads of the player. And this can be assisted by putting it in an oven, a baking process. Doesn't always completely clear it though, and the baking process doesn't help with mould as such at all. So in general, tape degradation is going to be a bigger and bigger issue over the coming decades. Another reason it's time to get your tapes transferred if you haven't already. Now, I asked the respondents if they had any other comments, and some of them were a bit long to go wading our way through, but I'll just look at some of the comments we had back from competitors. We're not telling you which competitor said which thing, of course. Somebody says, looking forward to 3D hologram videos. I'm not sure I quite follow that. Yes, absolutely. Worried about equipment, specifically VHS, becoming rare and expensive to replace. Yes. And someone says the cost of advertising on Google is too high. I used to advertise on Google and I don't anymore. It was expensive and I felt the leads I was getting weren't that good. Better to be, I think, what they call organically high up on the lists, and I think personally my YouTube channel has done that enormously. He also says he is reversing Brexit and he doesn't get any EU business now. I think that's a little bit harsh. I do still get work from Europe, and I don't think we're going to be able to reverse Brexit that quickly, but there's a possibility over some period of time that we might rejoin the customs union, and that would largely solve the problems for business. I would be holding out for that one. Okay, so we have a counter to all my Brexit whinging and somebody saying that business has improved since COVID and Brexit. Both sides of the argument. Now, one chap says he's keeping an open mind about future possibilities and services offered and new directions. That's a very good point. I do think it's important to keep looking at what you can do. So, I mean, I started just doing video transfers, and initially just domestic, and then moved to a lot more professional formats, and then added audio. There are always other possibilities. So people might want to add slide scanning or document scanning, or I don't know. I'm not about to start thinking of all the possible things you could do, but businesses do need to keep an open mind. Now, of course, when I go back to the beginning of this business, everything was on DVD, and you need to keep looking to the future. So everything became video files. It started out on hard disks and USB, and then uploads. And so I think it's important to keep looking ahead at what services you could do. For example, you might find that you become so good at video editing that you can offer video editing services to other YouTubers, or always think ahead and think about what people might be needing 5 years from now, so you don't get stuck in the mud. I think some of the businesses that were set up purely to do things like VHS to DVD have probably gone by the wayside now because the world has moved on. So yes, absolutely, keep an eye to the future. And someone else on a similar topic actually saying, okay, well, they are now finding that the customers don't even have access to a computer anymore. They only have tablets and the likes. So how do you deliver the files to them? And that can be a bit of an issue, because if you can't deliver high quality video files to somebody who only has a tablet, they're not going to be able to store them. So you need to think to the future about, well, perhaps you can have cloud services. Perhaps you can give them somewhere to put those video files that they can always access them. I'm not sure we're quite there yet, but that's a possibility for the future, that all the uploads, all the files can be provided as uploads and provided in a permanent place for the customer to access, both in small format for something like a tablet and large format for TVs and editing and future-proofness. Another saying that is extremely tough at the moment. He's saying that the Ukraine situation and Brexit and the cost of living is making conditions extremely tough. Another one comments on something that's very much been on my mind, and I know some of my other competitors for years doing this. It's that it's actually quite expensive to do properly. And you see some outfit charging just a few quid on eBay, and people will send their tapes to them and they'll just stick it on DVD using a little combo video DVD recorder type thing and think that that's fine. They don't realise that that's not fine longer term, and they could have got so much better results if they paid a little bit more. Oh yes, my email out to people getting them to think about stuff to comment on was included a mention of the VHS Decode Project. And this is not, despite its unfortunate name, really limited to VHS at all. It's a way of taking the extremely high frequency signal that comes off the heads, the RF signal from the video heads of a video recorder, be it VHS or Betamax, V2000, 8mm, and digitizing that directly and then doing all the decoding later, so replacing all the electronics with software. And it means you get better performance. You don't need a time-based corrector because it's all done in software. The project's been going for quite a while. I think it was based on a project used for decoding the data on the Doomsday laser discs, which were recorded in a system where there was not really much hardware available to still decode that. So it's an extension of that. It has the potential to give better quality results using even quite modest players. Now, you could argue that that's a good thing for our business because it could make it easier for us to get better quality results without having to use really rather hard to get hold of equipment. Or you could think of that as some terrible threat that we're still trying to do transfers using the proper equipment, and then people out there are just using a cheap Bush VHS machine and doing the transfers themselves. So at the moment, it's non-trivial for anybody to set up the equipment and get the VHS Decode Project to work for them. It's not ready yet, but over a period of some years it may come to fruition, so that it's not hard for someone to rig up their own equipment. I think it's probably always going to be beyond the man in the street sort of thing, and it's not like any more players are ever going to be built. Nobody could make a VHS machine or Betamax machine or Video 8 machine now. The hardware required to make those decks is being discontinued. So the chips won't be made anymore, and the video heads aren't being made anymore, and it's not on. So the only way it could be done in terms of being able to sell things is if somebody can buy loads of VHS machines and 8mm machines and add the VHS decode electronics and software in a sort of a kit. I don't know how that's going to pan out, but longer term it might be useful. I think if it gets to the point that it's usable, I'll probably set up some VHS decode equipment for a few formats. But I don't think I'd do that as standard. It would have to be an extra for people who want that, their tapes run through that system as opposed to the conventional players and time-based correctors that we have access to here. So an interesting way forward perhaps, but it still doesn't solve the fundamental problem that you still need a reasonably good deck to play a tape, whatever happens. Well, this has been a fascinating look at the state of play in this business, and I think probably a lot of what we've been talking about has been useful to other small businesses who might be finding it rather hard at the moment. So do talk to other people in your business, in your field. Now I'd like to say a big thank you to the companies on the screen who have contributed. There have been several others who wanted to remain anonymous. Absolutely understand that. That's absolutely fine. But thank you all for contributing to this. I'll do a lot more content on audio and video technology in the near future, so do come by and watch that. Watch the outro credits if you've not been a subscriber to this channel before, and see some of the things that I do. Bye for now.